So Sara and I were very fortunate across our undergraduate career to have the opportunity to be student athletes here at Michigan. And we're hoping today that we can get some awesome conversation going about the changes that the future civil rights leaders should aim to make for their futures.
In order to understand today, you have to understand the history and the role that sports played in our history, in this country's history of changing conceptually the role of minorities, women, not only in sports, but in the workplace, in the environment, in the country that we live in. So you have these particular pieces that have come together, and then you go into the 70s with Title IX and the legislation and the impact in bringing sports, women's sports, to Michigan and other institutions around the country. Really changes that dynamic of what women can do in the world, what Black people, what Hispanic people can do in the world. And to showcase that through sports really opens people's minds to the potential of what else can be done, what other doors can be opened. And so sports has played a significant role.
What type of advice would you give future, leaders in athletics or civil rights movements? What type of advice would you give them to continue leading and making change happen in this arena?
I think it goes to that old adage, if you see something, say something. And that affects, that goes to social injustice, that you can't have the perspective that something needs to change to be an athlete, to be held up on a pedestal, and then feel like you can just ignore it, that you can't walk away from it and not try to change, not try to help. And I think if more of us in our society went outside of ourselves and said, how can I be helpful? What can I do to help the world be a better place? I think it would be a better place. Mm-hmm. And I think I would say to kids that you need to educate yourself so that as you progress in life, you have a base of knowledge to know not only the problems that existed in the past, but the solutions that were brought to those problems also advance us now to understand how can we be better through sports in order to better the sense of the community and bringing people together through that. And then lastly, it's just a lifelong commitment, to making the world a better place. But it's that sense of commitment to each other in your community and your schools, walking away from the little things that tear us apart, from the things that you think as a young person are important, looks and what kind of clothes you have on and what shoes you have on. The reality is the mind and the person and the characteristics of those individuals are what's most important and what's going to carry you through life. All those other things, how you look on a Snapchat. The reality is it really doesn't matter if we're trying to make sure that we're being a positive influence on ourselves and others for the betterment of the community. I'm gonna ask y'all a question. How does that help to impact positive change?
I think using your voice and your presence on that social media platform to do things to help others, to not make it always about yourself, to really focus on being more empathetic. And I think for our generation, and for the generations to come, empathy is going to be a very important tool to help people prevent a lot of those barriers.
A lot of communities come together around sports. So do you think if athletes spoke out a little bit more about these issues, that maybe they would be seen in a more positive light because athletes are seen in a more positive light?
One thing I always tell you all as former student athletes and student athletes is be yourselves. Be true to who you are, but once, don't do it because you think it's the in thing to do. Do it because you can stand up and say, this is what this means to me. This is why this is important. And then let the naysayers and the people who don't believe in it, don't not listen to them, but don't focus on them. Focus on the good that you think you're doing in this.
So if we were thinking about this next generation of civil rights leaders and and possibly their involvement in athletics. What would you say to them if they were a little bit defeated?
I think you have to face the reality of a loss is something that teaches you how to be better the next time out. In that we're not going to win every time, but you win by the effort. You win by making the strides. I guess it's how I feel every day when I deal with our sports. You know, we may lose a game, but we're not losers. We're not defeated, where we can't operate anymore or we don't feel like we can perform. We lose. When we lose, we also learn. And by learning, we become better.
If there was any piece of advice you could give yourself as a high school kid trying to change the world and become, the leader that you are today, what would that be?
I love my mom and dad. It gave me a great childhood. But at times I isolated myself, to just sports, just my friends in sports. And I missed great opportunities. I would just always encourage young people and always try to encourage young people to get outside of the scope of their team, experience what your community is about, to broaden your perspective on life and the differences and the different things that are out there to do and to understand.
And I think that goes back again to what you're talking about with being able to see other perspectives and be open to them, being able to empathize and also sympathize with those who are different than you.
And listen, this is a complex community, state, country, and world that we live in. And not everybody's going to see things the way I see them, but by being able to share my thoughts and listen to other people without being ready to tell them why they're wrong.
Pounce back.
Yeah, it's we become a better community in a better sense, and then you could start to affect change because there's some middle ground. Two circles that overlap. We may disagree, but man,
there's that small
we
section.
have that core, right, of belief in children and education. We may see it differently on how to go about doing it, but we can agree that we believe in education and we can try to find a common ground there. So I mean, it's things like that I think tend to help people open up.
Yes.
I think that's one of the most amazing things about sports is it kind of brings together a lot of people with differences to achieve one common goal.
Right.
And hopefully, moving forward, the future leaders of, civil rights and social justice movements, especially in the athletic world, will keep that in mind and think about their differences, but also their similarities and learn from each other.
We just want to say thank you, Warde, for coming out again to talk about social justice in sports and with the Civil Rights Academy. It was awesome hearing what you had to say about that, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Thank you.